This month, when the Democrats finally passed their big $1 trillion bill to rebuild our roads and bridges, 6 Democrats voted no because it didn't go far enough to address climate change, which I'm sure is true. What does? But this was free money from the federal government that would actually improve their constituents' lives. I can see a voter saying, you know, squad, I agree with you on climate change. But as long as it is happening, we also need money for getting the water pumped out of the subway.
Bill Maher is back blasting his own side, accusing it of fully losing touch with reality, and the takedown was ruthless.
James Carville knew how to win, and he blamed the Democratic losses this November 2nd on stupid wokeness, to which AOC fired back that wokeness is a term almost exclusively used by older people these days. So that should tell you all you need to know. What? This is a term folks like you brought out very recently and had been proudly displaying at every march since. Just last year, The Guardian declared woke the word of our era. I guess they didn't get the memo from the Mean Girls Club.
Seeing Maher go after his own camp without restraint is rare, but when he does, it's pure gold, ruthless criticism blended with razor-sharp comedy. There's plenty to unpack, so buckle up and dive straight into what comes next.
But I will tonight once again break out my coach hat and try to point the Democrats in the right direction. That's all I can do. Point you in the right direction. I'm like throat. Because the way this party is running for office is making me gag.
Maher has arrived at a blunt conclusion. The DNC has drifted far from its original mission and is now chasing a grab bag of fringe priorities that barely align with core liberal values. Instead of focusing on everyday concerns that shape real lives, jobs, affordability, safety, and opportunity, the party has become obsessed with ideological purity tests and niche activism. In Maher's view, that widening disconnect explains exactly why Democrats lost elections in the first place. Voters didn't suddenly reject liberal ideas. They simply stopped recognizing themselves in a party that no longer spoke their language. Maher argues the DNC didn't fail for being too bold or too compassionate, but for losing sight of what liberalism was meant to represent. Watching the party drift politically and stumble morally, he now trying to grab the wheel, pushing Democrats back toward reality, common sense, and the voters they've alienated and left feeling ignored.
I know liberals think this country is full of dumb white people, but in our democracy, dumb white people make up a substantial portion of the vote. The median voter is a white person in their 50s who didn't go to college, their favorite TV show is NCIS, and their pronouns are what? I don't know what you're talking about, and get away from me.
Maher argues that if the DNC truly wants to start winning elections again, it must stop preaching to its echo chamber and refocus on median voters, the people who actually decide elections. These aren't Twitter activists or campus ideologues, but everyday voters who swing outcomes based on common-sense concerns. Maher bluntly describes them as traditional, middle-of-the-road voters who care far less about woke causes than the left assumes. They aren't disengaging because they're ignorant or malicious. They're tuning out because they don't see their daily struggles reflected in the party priorities. In Maher's view, Democrats have drastically overestimated interest in niche cultural battles while underestimating concern for safety, stability, and economic reality. Ignore these voters, he warns, and you lose elections. Dismiss them, lecture them, or write them off, and defeat is guaranteed.
In 2008, Republicans only won 4 Virginia counties by more than 70%. This month, in the governor's election there, they did it in 45 counties. And this is what a lot of Democrats were told was the reason for that. Glenn Youngkin's win proves white ignorance is a powerful weapon. Racism still works in Virginia. It's not the messaging, folks. This country simply still loves white supremacy. Well, I haven't worked up an official Democratic campaign slogan for 2024 yet, but I tell you what I have ruled out is vote Democrat because white people suck.
Maher contends that Democrats keep bleeding votes because they instinctively interpret every loss through the lens of identity politics. When their candidate loses, the explanation is often cast in moral or cultural terms, yet when they win, the system is suddenly hailed as fair, just, and progressive. Maher isn't opposing diversity or representation, he cleared that anyone, regardless of race, should be free to run for office and succeed on merit. What frustrates him is the selective logic and intellectual inconsistency at play. Voters aren't naive, and they notice when election outcomes are explained through ideology instead of competence, ideas, or performance. Reframing every defeat as proof of racism, rather than confronting flaws in policy or messaging, alienates people who might otherwise be willing to listen. In Maher's view, Democrats are undermining themselves by moralizing every loss instead of asking the harder, more uncomfortable question: why voters rejected what they were offering.
You're alienating a whole lot of people, particularly whites without a college degree, which is most of them in a country that's still 70% white. I'd say do the math, but math is a form of white supremacy. To a lot of folks in America, you come across as the cares about everybody but me party. And it doesn't have to be that way. You can find ways to stand up for these folks without being David Duke.
Maher argues that Democrats are paying a steep political price for what many longtime working-class voters see as outright abandonment. From his perspective, the party has become so focused on courting new demographics and championing causes beyond America's borders that it no longer speaks clearly to a large share of its traditional base. Instead of prioritizing the everyday concerns of working and middle-class white voters' wages, housing, crime, and economic stability, the DNC appears far more energized by immigration debates and global moral signaling. Maher stresses this isn't an argument against immigration or diversity, but a warning about imbalance. When one group consistently feels ignored, resentment is inevitable. Over time, many base voters come to believe the party no longer sees them as a priority or worse, views them as a liability rather than citizens to represent. According to Maher, pretending that perception doesn't exist won't make it disappear. It only guarantees more losses when voters head to the polls.
But this was free money from the federal government that would actually improve their constituents' lives. I can see a voter saying, you know, squad, I agree with you on climate change. But as long as it is happening, we also need money for getting the water pumped out of the subway. Can we do that before we build the workers' paradise?
Maher goes even further, arguing that the woke activist wing isn't just neglecting voters but actively dragging the DNC down. In his view, ideology has overtaken practicality. Rather than accepting funding that could genuinely improve lives, repairing infrastructure, strengthening public safety, or easing economic pressure, some woke governors and lawmakers choose virtue signaling instead. They reject funding outright if it doesn't perfectly align with their preferred cultural causes. Maher sees this as political self-sabotage masquerading as moral superiority. Everyday voters aren't invested in ideological purity tests. They want tangible results. When leaders turn away real-world solutions in favor of social media applause, it sends a clear message that symbolism matters more than citizens. According to Maher, this kind of performative politics doesn't build trust, it breeds frustration. Voters notice potholes left unfixed, communities left behind, and opportunities wasted, all because leaders chose posturing over governing. And every time that happens, Maher warns, Democrats lose credibility, confidence, and votes.
Why is the party that supports so many issues that benefit the middle class still considered out of touch by 62% of Americans? In plain English, nobody likes a snob. Hillary Clinton didn't have anyone on rural research or outreach when she ran in 2016 until the race tightened just before the election. Then they hired one. And where was his office? Brooklyn. True story. Politics is local, not locally sourced. It's not artisan. It's art and stand.
Maher struck another nerve by urging Democrats to drop hollow theatrics and start delivering concrete, measurable results. He argues that too much of the party energy is wasted on symbolic gestures, performative outrage, and virtue signaling that plays well online but leaves real lives unchanged. In Maher's view, voters are exhausted by speeches, hashtags, and moral posturing that never translate into real progress. What people want, he says, are policies that actually work: lower costs, safer neighborhoods, stronger schools, and genuine economic stability that benefits everyone, not just politically favored groups. Instead of governing, Democrats too often appear focused on showcasing moral superiority rather than solving problems. Maher believes this obsession with optics over outcomes is draining the party of trust and credibility. Voters don't choose leaders to be lectured. They choose them to deliver results. If Democrats want to win back disillusioned voters, Maher argues they must abandon the grandstanding, stop catering to activist extremes, and return to the basic work of governing, serving constituents competently, practically, and without ideological spectacle.
Your microaggression culture doesn't play in the Rust Belt. If a staffer hands you a speech that says menstruating people instead of women, don't say that. Say women.
Maher argues that Democrats are hurting themselves by constantly pandering to what he calls the woke mob, a group he sees as loud, influential, and largely disconnected from most voters. In his view, the party has allowed a small but vocal faction to shape its language, priorities, and public image. Maher says Democrats need to move away from woke policies, endlessly shifting buzzwords, and the performative outrage that now dominates their messaging. None of it, he argues, addresses the core concerns people actually care about. Instead, it pushes away median voters who feel talked down to rather than meaningfully engaged. According to Maher, elections aren't won by pleasing activists or chasing online applause. They're won by focusing on fundamentals like affordability, safety, opportunity, and effective governance. When Democrats prioritize ideological signaling over practical solutions, they lose credibility with the voters who ultimately decide elections. Maher's message is unmistakably clear: drop the posturing, speak plainly, govern seriously, and reconnect with the center. That's how trust is rebuilt and votes are won.
Their whole life, they don't know how to win. James Carville knew how to win, and he blamed the Democratic losses this November 2nd on stupid wokeness. To which AOC fired back that wokeness is a term almost exclusively used by older people these days. So that should tell you all you need to know. What? This is a term folks like you brought out very recently and had been proudly displaying at every march since.
Older liberals like James Carville and Bill Maher have become some of the most vocal critics of what they see as the extremes of woke politics, often ridiculing it as counterproductive nonsense. From their perspective, liberalism used to focus on winning elections and improving lives, not policing language or chasing ideological perfection. By contrast, many younger liberals, in Maher's view, seem fully immersed in what he calls the woke Kool-Aid, treating these ideas less as political strategy and more as unquestionable doctrine. Figures like AOC and Ilhan Omar, Maher argues, worsen the problem by doubling down on rhetoric that energizes activists but alienates everyday voters. Rather than broadening the party appeal, they narrow it, turning politics into a purity test instead of a governing mission. The generational divide is clear. Older liberals warn this approach is electoral poison, while younger voices seem convinced moral signaling can replace tangible results at the ballot box. Maher's warning is blunt: Democrats are losing because they've lost focus. By pandering to woke theatrics, abandoning practical governance, and ignoring median voters, the party has drifted from reality. Until Democrats shed ideological posturing, speak plainly, and deliver outcomes that matter to ordinary Americans, they will keep losing elections and blaming everyone but themselves. That wraps up today's video. If you enjoyed it, hit like and subscribe for more content like this.